Joining us now, Mercedes Schlapp, former White House Communications Director to the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, now a senior advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. Mercedes, great to have you.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. I got to play a montage we made for you, Mercedes, at Colleen's.
That was brilliant.
we got a montage. We call it the Mercedes montage, Colleen. Should we just call it that? It would probably get more hits. Let's get more hits if we just
montage. I mean, come on.
Right, the Mercedes morning montage.
Ooh, that's brilliant. I love it.
Let's do that. Let's rename it so we can get like a million downloads. Here, I'm writing this down. Mercedes morning montage. Of course, we'll have to do one after your hit with us today. Let's play it, Colleen, the Mercedes morning montage.
A little bit of Monica in my
The John Fredericks Show.
John Fredericks Show. John Fredericks Show.
Joining us now to break all this down. Hey, Mercedes, let's get to Anthony Scaramucci.
He is a very selfish, opportunistic individual.
Scaramucci.
Thought that he was the king of the White House.
Scaramucci.
He has no loyalty to the president. He has no loyalty to really helping the American people.
It was a horror story.
Some women staffers came to me afterwards, and they said it was the most horrific 11 days that they've ever experienced.
Horror story.
And it was a very unhealthy environment for these young staffers. Would harass girls. The job harassment component, which was psychological games that he would play with the staff, harass girls, constantly threatening to fire everybody. Who's the next person I'm going to fire? Fire everybody.
It's unbelievable, Scaramucci. The guy was a complete clown show, Scaramucci. He got fired.
You're fired.
It just shows how unsuccessful he is, where he couldn't even survive the White House for more than 11 days.
You're fired.
And that lack of humility and the complete arrogance is the destruction of Anthony Scaramucci.
You're fired.
Thanks, John. It's always a great honor to be on your show, and really fun.
That's the Mercedes morning montage from last week.
We do have a lot of fun on your show. I have to say, it's like I can have my morning coffee. We can have a great conversation. It's wonderful.
Okay, that montage is one of the best that me and Al have done, and I thank Al Green for doing that for us. It was
I
funny.
always wanted to be a rapper, so that's really helpful.
I know you're right in the rap. It's your rap. That's your rap montage, Mercedes Schlapp, senior advisor, Trump 2020. Okay, Mercedes, I got to get to this hearing yesterday. Corey was like, I can't believe you're having so much fun when I'm up here getting grilled. I said, I'm sorry, dude. It's just I couldn't stop laughing. Especially one of his best lines is when he sold his book. He said, yes, you got to read this book. It's really good. Available at your favorite bookstore.
I have to tell you, between Dancing with the Stars and Sean Spicer on Monday, and then we had Corey on Tuesday, I couldn't get it. It was like must-watch TV, I have to tell you.
Unbelievable. Now, where do the Democrats go from here? And Mercedes, there was an article today just came out in the New York Times, not that they're credible, but blasting Nadler, saying that the whole thing was a complete joke and that he fumbled the ball and that he pushed his members into this line of questioning that some of them didn't want to do, that didn't make any sense. What do you make of this now, Mercedes?
I think that the Democrats have made this decision where, they have over 100 members who really want to proceed with the impeachment inquiry, despite the fact that you've had Nancy Pelosi send a very clear message to her members saying we don't want to go in this direction. Because I think Pelosi, even with her own craziness, understands the political damage that this will cause the Democrats in 2020. But it's Nadler and these very far left Democrats who ran on impeaching the president. Remember, this is what they ran on in 2016 2018. So their goal now is to fulfill their promise of impeaching the president, despite the fact that there is no crime, that the Mueller report came out a while back ago, and it showed that the president was exonerated.
So the whole thing, the whole 7 hours yesterday was worthless as far as the doing anything for the American people. They gained no new information. They got nothing out of it. There's no revelation. It was a 7-hour waste of time. Other than that, it entertained me. That was all they got out of this thing.
Well, I have to say it must have helped Corey. I mean, I'm sure the Republicans watching him were saying, like increasing Corey's popularity because he handled them so well. These Democrats really grilled him. They tried to, obviously, they make their own political statements instead of asking questions in a lot of ways, in blaming the president, for everything under the sun. And Corey really fought back. And I have to say, I think for us, you obviously were widely entertained. We were cheering him on. We were like, go, Corey, go. This is exactly what we need.
Well, and he's
the absurdity of this process.
They drag him in there for this hearing to embarrass him, humiliate him, or do whatever, and he ends up launching what is going to be his U.S. Senate campaign off it, raises millions of dollars, launches a website, and becomes a folk hero for Trump supporters all in one day, who's going to have backing from Trump world all around the United States, including where we are now, and he's going to run for Senate, and I think he's going to win. But what he did yesterday is he showed Jean Shaheen she's got a fight on her hands, because this guy is very savvy. Look, those that know Corey like I do, that know him well, we knew all this. We know how smart he is. We know he's savvy. We know he can do strategy. He can also execute tactically, and he's unflappable under fire. Yeah. I mean, those of us that have worked with him, I mean, that's his MO. The guy is absolutely unflappable under fire. He just stands there like a statue in the middle of a Holocaust happening. I mean, you can't move him. And so these are traits in a political candidate running for U.S. Senate I think are going to be very attractive. I think he's going to be the nominee in New Hampshire, and I think he's going to win that race, as I think the president is going to likely carry New Hampshire. So, Mercedes, look, they do this, but they can't pass UMCA. So we have farmers suffering that could be making money right now. So instead of helping U.S. citizens, they do an 8-hour fiasco leading nowhere. When are they accountable for this, Mercedes?
Well, they're going to be accountable 2020. Obviously, I think that one of the things to understand is with the Judiciary Committee, they are responsible for a lot of these, for example, border issues. Mm-hmm. So they haven't even tackled any of the immigration bills that they need to be tackling in the House. They're behind on so many of things that just need to get done for the American people. Instead, Nadler has obviously made it his priority to hone in on finding a crime and trying to take down the president. I'm sure, look, these candidates are fundraising off of this. They're going to cut and slice these videos and post them up and said how they were, basically, trying to hold the former campaign manager accountable. Mind you, let's remember, Corey didn't even work in the White House. So they were just honing in on one particular letter that the president had asked Corey to write to give to Jeff Sessions in terms of a suggestion. There's no crime here. Like, I'm going to say this again. That's why you had over 2 years of, the FBI investigation, an extensive investigation, and 2 years of just constant media coverage of the collusion that never happened. So I got to tell you, the American people have moved past this. That's why, whenever these Democrats go crazy, and now they've talked about impeaching, Kamala Harris saying, let's try to impeach Brett Kavanaugh, I say go for it. Keep down that narrative. That narrative is a losing narrative for mainstream Americans that are basically saying, wait a second, you guys want to impeach a qualified Supreme Court justice now, and you guys want to try to impeach this president? We have no appetite for this. We want to ensure that you solve the issues of the day, i.e. our immigration crisis that we're seeing at the border. The fact that we need to get USMCA passed because we know it would be a beneficial deal for our farmers across the country. So they know who's getting the work done, and that's President Trump.
No question about it. And in fact, I'm going to play a clip to get your reaction to it now. Colleen, let's get up. I think that is the president here talking about the New York Times saying that everyone should get fired. Colleen, do we have that? I want to get that up for Mercedes here in a second, because the Kavanaugh thing is, I mean, it's like beyond the pale. You think you got what is it, 6 or 7 of these presidential candidates jump on this story and it's not even true. I mean, the person that was supposed to be the victim said that even in the book, she said, "No, I'm not going to testify." Well, did this happen? I have no recollection of it. Were you there? I don't even think I was at the party. I mean, they just make this stuff up. Let's run Trump at the rally on the New York Times.
Look at what they're doing today to Justice Kavanaugh. Look at what they're doing. Did you see the New York Times? Did you see what they're doing? Did you see what Democrats? They're calling for his resignation. They're calling for his impeachment. And the woman involved said she didn't know anything. She doesn't, but they still. So the New York Times had to put out a major apology, and they had to change their story. The woman said, "I don't remember that." Okay, and they still want him to be impeached. And I just put out a statement, and he's a great man, by the way, great talent, a great, brilliant man, Brett Kavanaugh.
All right, Mercedes, it's just inconceivable to me that the New York Times publishes a story. They edit out the fact that the person that claimed Kavanaugh had the sexual misconduct, Max Stier, was a Clinton lawyer. They edit out the fact that the woman who was so allegedly supposed to be the victim, of course, there is no victim, because she says she's not going to testify. She's not going to talk about it. And then they ask her if she remembers it. She says, "I don't recall this ever happening." And then she says, "I don't even recall being at that party." Yet they just run that and cut it out. And then you got 7 of these candidates calling for the guy to be impeached.
Yeah, I have to, again, I think it's just the losing political strategy of the left. And the mere fact that you have the New York Times in cahoots with the Democrats and in cahoots with with the far left, they have an agenda, and their agenda has always been to take down this president, and their agenda has been to take down qualified individuals like Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, the Brett Kavanaugh debacle is personal to me because I know Brett. I worked with Brett in the George W. Bush White House. I know his wife really well. This is one of the most stand-up guys you'll ever meet. Someone who I was a colleague with at the White House, who was the most respectful, professional, brilliant lawyer that I got to work with during that time. So whenever I hear these stories start popping up again, it goes nowhere. We've had the FBI investigations done; they're complete. The hearings are over. He's confirmed. The biggest problem is the Democrats are stuck in the past, while Republicans and President Trump are saying, no, we need to move forward. They want to talk impeachment. They want to raise money off impeachment. Go for it. But I got to tell you, I just don't think it sells. I think anyone who's a political strategist would advise these Democrats to stay away from that. They're not going to win that argument. Oh,
they're not going to stay away from it because they're locked in now because their base is demanding it, and they're kind of trapped. This is not.
Well, and John, you know this. I mean, they're concerned. They're concerned that if something were to happen to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that it would fall again, for the President Trump to pick another Supreme Court, and that is where the liberals get very nervous. I mean, you remember how all these women would wail outside the Supreme Court after he was confirmed. I mean, it was like something I'd never seen.
Well, Mercedes, you just said that the New York Times, you gave the example, that the New York Times is basically shilling for the Democratic Party. When you were communications director at the White House, you obviously had to deal with Maggie Haberman and other people that work for the New York Times, both editorially, opinion-wise, and those that do news and news analysis, which is the way they hide their opinion in news by calling it that. As communications director at the White House, what was your experience with them?
I think that with a lot of these reporters, they come in, they ask, the tough questions, and what I find is their obsession is with the process stories, like, how does the president feel today? Is the president angry because of X, Y, Z? Like, it's all like it's almost like it's a gossipy role that they play to gain anything that could be remote about the president's behavior or mental fitness, or that's where they're stuck, and that's where a lot of their obsession is. So what happens is that it becomes more about the personality in fights than it does about real policies that impact the American people. And that's what I have seen, in the difference. Now, of course, the press shop, and that was more Sarah Sanders and that team, they dealt with reporters every day. Mm-hmm. I would focus more on what we needed to do to push out the president's message and what events would look like, and who the president needed to talk to, or what the message would be of the day. So we were more of the external pushing out information. Sarah had to deal mostly, God bless her, had to deal with the everyday reporters. And I tell you, whenever I did any of the outside gaggles following the press hits, some of the questions were just simply absurd. I mean, simply absurd, where you're like, these guys are really journalists, or they just advocates for the far left. I mean, they have an agenda. It's what they push out, and it's a lot less sometimes about policy and more about, any type of personality or relationships in the White House.
Well, Mercedes, they all complain that Sarah Huckabee and now Stephanie Grisham no longer does the press briefings in the press room, of which I'm a hard pass holder. I'm part of the White House correspondence crew, but they did it to themselves, because that thing, I mean, I went there every time. I was there almost everyone they had when they had them, and the so-called reporters there, many of them in the front row, basically turned the thing into a sideshow. And it was for a soundbite, and it was on TV, and a lot of them would ask ridiculous. There weren't even questions; they were just statements that they would make, and then they would get a signed paid gig on CNN the next week. I mean, the whole thing turned into a joke, and they disrespected the whole purpose of it. And so finally, the White House said, "Well, the hell with it. We're just going to cancel it." And when the president goes out to catch helicopter one, he'll talk to anybody that's there, and then he'll leave. And so they did that to themselves. I don't know how many of those I sat through aghast at the combativeness, the stupid questions, the grandstanding. It's like, look, the purpose of this press briefing is to get information back to our respective audiences. That's the purpose of it, not to grandstand on TV. And, just some of the stupid things that came out of that was abhorrent. And so they did that to themselves.
I feel two things. I think that I do think that some of these reporters, and I would say some of them were really just top-notch reporters that I got to deal with. But then you did have those that did love to see themselves on TV and try to let me do the takedown with Sarah Sanders, because they know it would go viral. You see like a Jim Acosta Twitter, and you would think that Jim Acosta has been hired by the DNC. I mean, there's no question where his loyalty lies. And so you look at headlines between like a Pete Buttigieg headline versus a President Trump headline, there's no comparison of where the love fest exists. And so the reality is, and I've spent enough time with the president, you know the president, he loves to be his own communicator in the sense that he is the most effective at delivering his message. And he goes straight at it, and he likes having the exchange with the reporters, and he gives them more access than any other president has given. So I do think that the press briefing became less of something that we needed and really allowing the president to directly engage with the reporters, which is exactly what the American people want to see. And so, the role of press secretary, and now they've combined the role of press secretary and communications director, has evolved. And I think, Stephanie has very strategic, and she knows how to send the messages out. And if you see her Twitter feed, it's really strong. And, she understands the president and the first lady really well. And so you become more of an advisor role and more of a leader in the team and let the president really be the one to shine, which is obviously what we love to see every day when he's talking to reporters.
Well, Mercedes, you absolutely nailed that. But, again, they did that to themselves. And you had April Ryan in there grandstanding and some of the others that ruined it, I think, for everybody. Anyway, Mercedes, we're out of time. I know you got a lot on your plate today, Trump 2020. Thank you, Senior Advisor for Trump 2020, Mercedes Schlapp. Thank you, Mercedes, for being with us.